And at the top, in bold, underlined capital letters, it says substantial involvement. Well, we were told HUD has nothing to do with this but provide seed money. And in that section, it says, HUD's Office of Sustainable Housing and Communities will work in partnership with these grantees to advance the program objectives of the grant program. The cooperative agreement allows for the substantial involvement of HUD staff to enhance the performance of the grantee in the completion of their deliverables. Now, in this section, there's 3 subsections. I'm just going to read a bullet point from each one. There's one section that talks about studies and reports. In there, it says review and provide recommendations of the final report/study, including final interpretation of study results. Now think about that. This is a bottom-up program according to them, but HUD is reserving final interpretation of study results. Okay? This program, the Sustainable Communities Initiative, has your town, your volunteers, your people who are going to go out and collect data in your community. Okay? Resource data, vernal pools, whatever, water, zoning. It's all going to get pumped into a GIS database. And then these become part of demographic data, and they will interpret what that data means and how it impacts your town and how it fits into the results of the studies that are produced via this program. And I'll get back to why that's really important in a little bit. There's another section in here that talks about approvals and reviews, and in there it says review and approval of key personnel. Now mind you, this is HUD staff. Substantial involvement by HUD staff may include review and approval of key personnel. That doesn't sound like a bottom-up program to me. And that was emphasized over and over and over again, not only in the first meeting, but in the second meeting when our planning commissioner got up and made his presentation yet again. Third section says participation and monitoring. It says implementing HUD requirements which limit recipient discretion. So we were told there are no requirements, there are no mandates, and right here in the legally binding, that's their words, okay, it's right here. It says implementing HUD requirements which limit recipient discretion. That clearly is not a bottom-up program, clearly. So we went from this document and we started to read all the other documents. And we were surprised to see that this really wasn't the type of thing that seemed to look at planning from a what's best for the town, and it seemed that there were some agendas there that were driving the underlying forces. It talks about, throughout these documents, compliance with the fair housing and civil rights laws. To further fair housing. It talks about socioeconomic inequality. Applicants are required to document measures of segregation and school poverty by participating community and by region. So that's demographic data. It talks about economic opportunity. Applicants are required to document the availability of subsidized housing within 2 miles of the region's 5 largest employment centers. More demographic data. It talks about fresh food access. I mean, there's things in here that you would... I wondered why they are even in here. Now, when you're filling out the narrative on the application, they're suggesting that if you want to put in additional measures to consider, you can talk about the cost burden of housing for the region's very low income and extremely low income populations, estimated homeless population and existing infrastructure that responds to the issue, shelters, service centers, etc., disparities in educational attainment by geography, percentage of new homes built within a half-mile of high-capacity transit service. Now that half mile, that kept coming up. It's pot marked all throughout these documents. Half mile, half mile, half mile from the town center, half mile from the, it's like, wow, you know, what is this all about? Eileen will get into that a little bit, right?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, so we went through, and another one of the legally binding documents is the Notice of Funding Availability. They refer to it as the NOFA, N-O-F-A. And in here it talks about equitable land use planning. So again, I'm reading from here. These are their words. This is not my opinions. It says the term equitable land use planning means zoning, land use regulation, master planning, and other land use planning that, at a minimum, furthers the purposes of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and the Fair Housing Act, and are intended to achieve additional objectives for expanded housing choice. For example, inclusionary zoning for housing designed for underserved populations on the basis of race, ethnicity, or socioeconomic group, blah, blah, blah. So they're talking about zoning, land use regulation, and master planning. So when we talked about maintaining control, autonomous control in Windham of our zoning, oh, of course you do. This has nothing to do with that. It talks about affirmatively furthering the fair housing. It references Section 808E5 of the Fair Housing Act. I looked that up, and what that does is it references a document called an analysis of impediments, which is what I referred to before. And the analysis of impediments goes through and it lists barriers to fair housing. Why a town's zoning regulations may make it difficult for people to come and live in your community. I will come back to that again. So, through all this, we got concerned. We wondered, are there other towns that maybe have gone through this and have expressed concerns or maybe backed out of the program? And we found one in Eyring, Arizona, and we were surprised to learn through their minutes of their one of their town council meetings that they had gone through the process. They actually started the process of planning, and it came to a point where they were being asked to sign an agreement, but they wouldn't let them see all the terms of the agreement. And the HUD representative at that point suggested to the Eyring Steering Committee that if they went off on their own and they continued to use the plans that they had started to develop as part of this program, that they would be using copyrighted materials for their community plan. So the council needs, and I'm reading directly from these minutes, the council needs to consider legal issues, and that HUD has spent thousands of dollars on the steering committee to get where they are now in the planning process. And he stated that the participant agreement into the consortium has been revised and that Eyring should readdress the issue as they owe it to HUD. HUD does not advise Eyring to move forward with the direction they are moving due to possible legal action taken against the town by HUD. Doesn't sound voluntary anymore. It doesn't sound bottom up. So one of the counselors stated that he's reviewed the revised contracts. They were in the process of trying to change a few of the terms. And he found that there are still requirements of the grant that cannot be removed, and he finds these requirements unacceptable. And no one has seen the goals and requirements of the consortium and HUD except Mr. Rogers and a few others. Councilor Finch is not willing to sign on to a contract when he does not know all the stipulations. So that was one of the towns. As we continued to do research, we found that there was a Westchester County, New York. They were sued and they were forced, or they settled for a $51.6 million settlement because they were being accused of nonconformance to the Fair Housing Act. And when we looked into this, we were concerned because the Fair Housing Act is mentioned over and over again in all these legally binding documents. And I called up the county executive of Westchester County, and I got his assistant, and I explained what we were going through with the Sustainable Communities Initiative and my concerns. And I asked, does this resonate with you or anyone on your end? And his response was, oh yes, and I'm sure the county executive himself would want to talk to you. I know he's tied up all day, but if he's busy, I'm sure he will have someone call you. And his chief of staff called me within an hour. And since then, I've spoken with him 3 or 4 times, and we've exchanged quite a few emails. And the whole basis of this lawsuit is that, and this was settled, they made it clear to me that this was settled with the previous county executive, that the current county executive, during the time of the settlement negotiations, was completely against all of this. But that since they did settle, they had an obligation and they were following through with the terms of the settlement. But, and the settlement was for $51.6 million to build 750 units in so-called eligible or mostly white communities over 7 years. Now, I just read that off of this. This is an op-ed from the county executive. Now, the county executive said, and this is one of his comments in here, it says, HUD's approach is to unilaterally move the goalposts in the middle of the game. Its technique is to repeatedly reject a routine document called an analysis of impediments. Okay? The settlement calls on the county to submit an AI that's, quote, acceptable to HUD. The purpose of the AI is to outline obstacles to fair housing choice, which the county has done. Prior to the settlement, HUD has never rejected an AI by the county, but now we are up to 5 rejections. HUD is clearly using the AI to try to expand the terms of the settlement from a straightforward stipulation to build housing into an open-ended utopian integration order, which HUD then plans to use as a model across the country. The fundamental problem is the facts. The law, economics, plain common sense, and the settlement itself don't support HUD's ambitions. Now, just to put all this in perspective, Westchester County, according to the most recent 2010 census, is one of the most diverse places to live in the United States. If Westchester is the 4th most diverse county in New York, behind Queens, the Bronx, tied with Manhattan and ahead of Staten Island. If Westchester were a state, it would be the 7th most diverse in terms of Hispanic representation and 14th most in terms of African American representation. So he went on to say that because of the demographic data, which states that Westchester County is 70% Caucasian, that they are considered to be de facto segregated. And they're trying to use that to force them to change their zoning laws. And according to this op-ed, which was written by the county executive, evidence of HUD's overreach includes the following unjustified demands: that the county dismantle local zoning laws, a power HUD knows full well the county does not possess, as New York is a home rule state.
GrokTV.